When my daughter told me that the home I had lived in for 40 years, the home I brought her back to from the hospital, was not a suitable venue for my own grandson's birthday party, I smiled. I listened to her explain, in excruciatingly gentle tones, why the backdrop of my life was an embarrassment to her new one. Then, I agreed to her outrageous demand for money and made one single phone call. By the end of the week, the river of cash that had flowed from my savings account into their pristine, minimalist lives had been dammed. And that was just the beginning. A mother's love is unconditional, but her respect must be earned. They were about to learn the difference. You will not believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and tell us what you think of Amanda's request in the comments below. It's just the flow, Mom, Amanda's voice said, filtering through the speaker of my phone. I had it on the kitchen counter, my hands busy kneading dough for the sourdough bread her father, David, had loved so much. The scent of yeast and memory filled the warm space. Mark's boss is going to be there and some of his clients. We want to make a good impression for Liam's 5th birthday. It's more of it's a garden party for the adults, really. Liam will have his little friends, of course, but the focus is on networking. The word networking landed on the polished oak of my kitchen table with a dull thud. Networking. At a 5-year-old's birthday party. I pictured my late husband, David, a man who could build a deck with his bare hands and quote Shakespeare with equal ease. He would have laughed until he cried at the sheer absurdity of it. But David was gone, and I was alone in this conversation, a relic in a world that now required flow and networking opportunities to celebrate a child's existence. I dusted the flour from my hands, my gold wedding band, worn thin over 4 decades, catching the afternoon light. I don't understand, darling. We've had every family birthday here since you were born. Remember your sweet 16? We set up that huge marquee in the backyard, right over the rose bushes. My rose bushes. The ones I'd nurtured from stubborn little twigs into a riot of crimson and ivory, their scent a permanent fixture of summers past. That was different, Mom. We were kids, she said, a hint of impatience coloring her carefully modulated tone. This is about our future, Mark's career. The house, it's just a little dated. The wallpaper in the dining room, the shag carpet in the den, it's not the image we want to project. My home, the repository of my entire adult life, reduced to an image we don't want to project. Every inch of these walls held a memory. Faint pencil marks by the doorframe, charting Amanda's growth from a toddler to a taller-than-me teenager. The slight stain on the ceiling in the living room where a champagne cork had gone rogue at our 25th anniversary party. The worn spot on the armchair where David sat every single evening, reading the paper, his feet propped up on the ottoman I'd needle-pointed myself. These weren't signs of a house that was dated. They were the hallmarks of a house that had been lived in, a house that had been loved. Through the phone, I could hear the faint clinking of ice in a glass, followed by the smug, bass-toned voice of my son-in-law, Mark. Just tell her, Amanda. Rip the Band-Aid off. A pause. Amanda sighed, a put-upon sound she had perfected since marrying him. Look, Mom, we want to host it at our place. It's cleaner, more modern. It makes the right statement. My jaw tightened. Cleaner. As if my home, which I scrubbed weekly with the same diligence I applied to everything in my life, was somehow dirty. What she meant was that it was filled with things. Books, photographs, antique furniture inherited from my own mother, quilts I'd sewn by hand. It was filled with my life, and that was too cluttered for their sterile, gray and white aesthetic. And, she continued, her voice dropping into a register I knew all too well, the one she used when she was about to ask for something astronomical. That brings me to the other thing. We were hoping you could help us out. We want to get the kitchen redone before the party. A proper statement kitchen. It'll cost about $50,000 for the marble countertops and the German appliances Mark wants. It's an investment, really, in our future. $50,000. The number hung in the air, sucking the warmth from the room. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the one David had always said was the most comfortable. My gaze fell upon the framed photo on the wall, a picture of a 20-year-old Amanda, grinning, arm in arm with me on a trip to the Grand Canyon. A trip I'd paid for with my bonus from the accounting firm where I'd worked for 30 years, before she met Mark. Before she started seeing my love not as a gift, but as a resource. The numb. Our rest began to spin in my head, a frantic, sickening tally of the last 7 years. The $80,000 I'd given them from my retirement savings for the down payment on their cleaner, more modern house. The monthly $5,000 transfers I made to a separate account for them, initially explained as just helping them get on their feet, a justification that had long since expired. The BMW for Mark's 35th birthday, because a man in his position can't be seen driving a Honda. The impromptu trip to Tuscany last summer, because Amanda needed to get away from the stress. The designer handbags, the Swiss watches, the country club membership. I had been their silent, smiling benefactor, the bottomless well from which they drew their luxurious lifestyle, all while convincing myself it was what a loving mother does. I was funding their future, a future in which my own home, my own life, was deemed too shabby for a 5-year-old's birthday party. "Mom, are you there?" Amanda's voice was sharp now. "Did you hear what I said about the kitchen?" I looked at my hands, the knuckles slightly swollen with arthritis, the skin thin and dappled with age spots. These were the hands that had changed her diapers, braided her hair, held her when she had her heart broken for the first time. These were the hands that signed the checks, that typed in the account numbers for the wire transfers, that had slowly, painstakingly signed away my own financial security for theirs. David had warned me about Mark. "He doesn't see our daughter, Alina," he'd said one evening, watching them from our porch. "He sees a stepping stone, be careful." I had dismissed it as a father's overprotectiveness. Now his words echoed in the hollow space he'd left behind. Mark wasn't just a stepping stone. He was the architect of this new Amanda, a woman who saw her own mother as a line of credit with a sentimental attachment. "Yes, darling, I heard," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. A cold, clear resolve was crystallizing in my chest, pushing out the hurt and replacing it with something hard and sharp. A statement kitchen, for Liam's party, of course. The relief in her voice was palpable, almost embarrassingly so. "Oh, Mom, thank you, you're a lifesaver. Mark will be so thrilled. I'll send you the account details for the contractor right away. You're the best mother in the world." The best mother in the world. The words, once a balm to my soul, now felt like an insult. I was the best bank in the world. I smiled, a real smile this time, but it wasn't for her. It was for me. It was the smile of a woman who had finally been pushed too far. "Of course, my love," I said, my tone dripping with the false sweetness she would never detect. "Anything to make sure Liam has a perfect day. I'll make the transfer tomorrow." We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call. The silence that descended was different. It wasn't the lonely silence of a widow in an empty house. It was the calm, focused silence of a strategist before a battle. I walked into my study, the room with the shag carpet they so despised, and sat at David's old mahogany desk. I didn't pull up my online banking portal. Instead, I pulled out a heavy, leather-bound ledger. For 7 years, I had documented every single cent, every transfer, every gift, every bill I'd paid. I had called it my book of love. Now I saw it for what it was, a ledger of exploitation. Exhibit A. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years, the number of my old college friend, Arthur, a man who had become one of the most feared forensic accountants in the country. "Arthur," I said when he answered. "It's Alina. I need your help. It's time to conduct an audit on my children." The game had changed. They thought they were playing a simple game of Monopoly with a sentimental old woman who would always land on their properties and pay rent with a smile. They were about to find out I owned the bank, the board, and the little silver car they'd been driving all over me. The phone felt heavy in my hand as I placed it back in its cradle. The echo of Arthur's voice, a mixture of gravelly concern and razor-sharp focus, seemed to linger in the study. "I'll clear my schedule for tomorrow morning, Alina. 10 a.m. my office. Bring everything." Everything. The word was a promise and a threat. For 7 years, everything had been a one-way street, flowing from my life into theirs. Now the flow was about to be reversed. I stood up and walked to the large bay window overlooking my garden. The last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and defiant orange. David had designed this window. He said a room wasn't complete unless you could see something growing. For so long, I had felt like I was wilting, my own life being pruned back branch by branch to allow my daughters to flourish in the sun. But as I looked at the neatly bound ledger on the desk, I didn't feel weak. I felt like the deep, gnarled roots of an old oak tree, unseen beneath the surface but immensely, immovably strong. The hurt was still there, a deep ache in my chest, but it was now overlaid with something else, the cold, clean thrill of a well-executed plan. The next morning, I dressed with purpose. Not in the soft cardigans and comfortable slacks Amanda associated with Mom, but in the charcoal gray power suit I used to wear to board meetings. It had been hanging in the back of my closet for a decade, a relic of a former life, but it still fit perfectly. I clasped my mother's pearl necklace around my neck and slid the heavy ledger into a leather briefcase David had given me when I first made partner. Driving downtown, I felt a sense of detachment, as if I were observing another woman's life. The city felt different, sharper. The familiar streets weren't just routes to the grocery store or the library. They were a grid, a system, something to be navigated with intent. Arthur's office was on the 30th floor of the tallest building in the city, a steel and glass monolith that scraped the clouds. The lobby was a symphony of hushed efficiency, the air smelling of expensive leather and ambition. When I gave my name to the receptionist, her professional smile didn't falter, but I saw a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. I probably didn't look like their typical client, a corporate titan embroiled in a hostile takeover. Or perhaps I did. Arthur greeted me himself, enveloping me in a brief, comforting hug that smelled of coffee and old paper. He hadn't changed much since David's funeral, still tall and wiry, with eyes that seemed to see straight through to the bottom line of any situation. "Eleanor," he said, his voice gentle but his gaze sharp. "You look like you're ready for war." He led me into his office, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the entire city. The walls were lined with books, not novels, but dense legal and financial tomes. There were no family photos, only framed degrees and certificates. It was a room built for battle. I said, setting my briefcase on his vast, polished desk. "I just didn't realize who the enemy was until yesterday." I opened the briefcase and laid the ledger on the desk between us. The title I had tooled onto the leather cover, Our Family Story, seemed mocking now. "This is it," I said. 7 years of helping them get on their feet. Arthur put on a pair of reading glasses and opened the book. He was silent for a long time, his long, elegant fingers turning the pages with a soft rustle that was the only sound in the room. He didn't just look at the numbers, he absorbed them. I watched his expression shift from friendly concern to professional focus, then to a quiet, simmering rage on my behalf. "My God, Eleanor," he breathed, finally looking up at me. "This is helping. This is systematic financial siphoning." "He's bled you dry." He took a legal pad and a pen, his movements suddenly brisk and efficient. "Talk me through it. I see the large sums, the $80,000 down payment, the $60,000 for the BMW. But these monthly transfers, household account top-up, $5,000 a month every month for 84 months. That's $420,000 on its own. What was that for?" I took a deep breath. "At first, it was for their mortgage shortfall, their utilities." Amanda said Mark's salary was mostly commission-based and unpredictable. "I have a pension and my investments. It was easy to set up an automatic transfer, but then it just became their lifestyle fund." I pointed to a page from 3 years ago. "Here, they went to Paris for 2 weeks. The transfers covered their first-class flights and the 5-star hotel. They sent me a postcard." A postcard, I thought, that cost me $12,000. Arthur made a note. "And these credit card payments? You've been paying off an Amex card in Amanda's name every month. The statements are attached." I nodded, feeling a flush of shame. "She said it was an emergency card, but the emergencies became frequent." "Here," I said, tapping a statement from last December. "A $4,000 handbag from Chanel, an $800 dinner at that new fusion restaurant downtown, a weekend at a spa. Her emergencies were my extravagances." Arthur's pen scratched furiously across the page. "Eleanor, this is beyond the pale, and you're the co-signer on this card and on Mark's platinum card as well." He said he couldn't get the credit limit he needed for his business expenses without my financial history to back him up, I murmured. "Another investment in his future." Arthur shook his head, his lips a thin, hard line. "No, it was a liability for your future. He used your good name to indebt you to his profligacy. We have to sever these ties immediately. Today." He leaned forward, his focus absolute. "Here is what we are going to do. First, you are going to call your bank. Why? Me on the line as your financial representative. You will close the joint account from which you make the monthly top-up. The funds remaining will be transferred to a new account in your name only, at a different institution. Second, you will contact the credit card companies. As a cosigner, you have the right to close the accounts or, at the very least, remove your name and liability from them. We will freeze them. Let's see what happens when the emergency card gets declined at the designer boutique. My heart hammered in my chest. It felt drastic, final. It felt terrifying and exhilarating. What about the $50,000 for the kitchen? I asked quietly. The contractor, Arthur smiled, but it was a chilling sight. An empty promise, Alina. The verbal agreement for a gift is not a legally binding contract. He can't force you to give him a cent. Let the contractor send his invoice to Mark and Amanda. Let's see how their clean, modern finances hold up under actual pressure. He outlined the next steps. We would create a blind trust for my assets, putting them out of reach of anyone who might try to claim incompetence or exert undue influence in the future. We would draft a new will, one that stipulated in no uncertain terms where my money would go, to my grandson, Liam, in a trust he couldn't access until he was 30, and to the charities David and I had always supported. Amanda and Mark would get nothing. As he spoke, the years of quiet humiliation, of biting my tongue, of writing checks with a smiling face and a breaking heart, coalesced into a single, diamond-hard point of resolve. David had always said I was too soft, but he also said I had a spine of steel when it mattered. It was time to prove him right. We made the calls from his office. The bank manager was deferential, asking no questions as he followed my instructions, Arthur's voice in the background adding legal weight to my requests. The credit card companies were more difficult, but Arthur was relentless, quoting terms and conditions back at them until they relented. By noon, it was done. The river had run dry. The accounts were frozen. The ties were cut. As I packed the ledger back into my briefcase, it felt lighter. I stood to leave, extending my hand to Arthur. I can't thank you enough, I said, my voice thick with emotion. He waved it away. David would have haunted me if I'd let them do this to you for one more day. Now go home, Alina, and don't answer the phone for a while. The fallout is going to be significant. I walked out of that steel and glass tower and back into the sunlight, feeling taller, stronger. The world looked brighter. Back in my own home, my wonderfully dated home, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the armchair by the window. I didn't have to wait long. At 3:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Mom, weird thing. My AMX just got declined trying to book the caterer. Can you check if everything is okay with the account? Also, the contractor needs the deposit. Did you make the transfer? I looked at the message on the screen. I saw the polite demand disguised as a question. I saw the casual assumption that I was the source of all solutions. I took a slow sip of my tea, savoring the warmth. Then I turned my phone over, silencing the screen, and picked up my book. The silence in my house was no longer empty. It was full. It was the sound of power. They had mistaken my love for an obligation. They were about to learn that when the bank is closed, all debts come due. If you are enjoying this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. What do you think Amanda and Mark will do when they realize the money is gone for good? Let us know in the comments. The silence in my house, which had felt so powerful and fulfilling just an hour before, began to feel like the deep, indrawn breath before a storm. My phone, which I had placed face down on the polished surface of the end table, was no longer quiet. It had begun to vibrate, a low, insistent hum against the wood. At first, the vibrations came in short bursts, the staccato rhythm of text messages. Then came the longer, more sustained buzzing of incoming calls. Amanda. Mark. Amanda again. I pictured them in their sterile, white kitchen, the one they so desperately wanted to tear apart and rebuild with my money. I imagined their initial confusion turning to irritation, then blossoming into full-blown panic. The caterer, the party planner, the florist for the custom centerpieces, all the cogs in the elaborate machine of their social ambition were grinding to a halt because the fuel line had been cut. I let it buzz. Each vibration was a small, satisfying confirmation that I had finally, after 7 long years, taken my hand off the tap. By late afternoon, the digital assault had escalated. The texts became a torrent of frantic capital letters and accusatory question marks. Mom, pick up the phone. This isn't funny. Followed by one from Mark, devoid of any pretense of affection. Alina, I don't know what kind of stunt you are pulling, but you are causing Amanda a great deal of distress. Call us back immediately. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it almost made me laugh. They inject the poison, the years of casual disrespect, the financial exploitation, the final, unforgivable insult about my home, and then they blame me for the pain when I finally administer the antidote. I walked into my kitchen and began to prepare a simple dinner for myself. A garden salad with vegetables I'd grown in my own backyard, and a piece of grilled salmon. The simple act of providing for myself, using my own resources for my own sustenance, felt revolutionary. As I ate my meal at the sturdy oak table David and I had bought at an auction 30 years ago, I thought about all the dinners I had funded for them at restaurants where the water alone cost more than my entire meal. All the checks I had signed so they could project an image of success that was entirely hollow, a facade built with my life savings. The pounding on the front door began just as I was washing my dishes. It wasn't a knock. It was a frantic, angry hammering that rattled the stained glass panes on either side of the door. There was no doubt who it was. Only people who believe they are owed something knock with such entitlement. I dried my hands slowly, straightened the collar of my blouse, and walked to the front hall. Through the peephole, I could see them, their faces distorted by the lens and their own fury. Amanda looked pale and tear-streaked, while Mark's face was a blotchy, furious red. I took a deep, calming breath, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. "Hello, Amanda. Mark," I said, my voice as placid as a summer lake. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" They practically fell into the entryway, bringing a storm of frantic energy into the calm of my home. "What do we owe the pleasure? Are you serious?" Amanda's voice was a high-pitched squeak. "Mom, what did you do? Everything has been canceled. The caterer, the deposit for the marquee, my Amex, Mark's Platinum card, everything is frozen. They said the accounts were closed on your instruction." Mark pushed past her, his expensive suit looking rumpled and his tie askew. He jabbed a finger in my direction. "This little game of yours has gone far enough, Alina. You've humiliated us. We have 50 people, important people, coming to our house in 3 days. You need to call the bank and fix this. Now." He spoke as if I were a disobedient employee, a subordinate who had made a costly error. The man whose car I had paid for, whose vacations I had funded, whose family I had supported, stood in my hallway and commanded me to fix the problem he and his wife had created. I closed the door with a soft click and turned to face them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "There is nothing to fix, Mark, and it is not a game," I said calmly. "I have simply made some long overdue changes to my personal financial arrangements. The joint account is now closed. My name has been removed as guarantor from all of your credit lines. The bank, as they say, is now closed." Amanda's mouth fell open. She stared at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "Closed? What do you mean closed? Mom, you can't do that. The party, Liam's birthday, the kitchen." The kitchen. The $50,000 statement kitchen. That was the core of it. The symbol of their ambition and the catalyst for my rebellion. "Yes, the kitchen," I said, my gaze level. "The one you needed my help to pay for because you needed to make the right statement at a party my home was not good enough to host. I decided to make a statement of my own." Mark took a step closer, his 6-foot frame looming over me. It was a classic intimidation tactic, one he probably used in his business dealings. It had no effect on me. I had faced down auditors from the IRS. A puffed-up salesman in a fancy suit was nothing. "You are being vindictive and cruel," he spat. "After everything we have done to include you in our lives." Include me? The words were so ludicrous they almost stole my breath. "Include me," I repeated, my voice dropping slightly. "By include me, do you mean asking me for money every month? By include me, do you mean allowing me to babysit my grandson only when your paid nanny is unavailable? Or do you mean include me in the way you did yesterday, when you told me that my home, the place where every happy memory of your wife's childhood resides, was a source of embarrassment to you? That my life's work was a dated backdrop that would tarnish your image?" Amanda flinched as if I'd struck her. "Mom, that's not what I meant." "It is precisely what you meant, Amanda," I interrupted, my voice still quiet but now edged with steel. "You meant that I and everything I represent am no longer good enough for the life you want to lead. A life I must reme. And you, that I have almost entirely financed." I turned my attention back to Mark, who was sputtering, his face turning a deeper shade of crimson. "You seem to believe that my resources are your birthright. Let me consult my records." I walked calmly into my study and returned with the ledger, holding it up for them to see. "According to my calculations, over the past 7 years, I have provided you with financial support totaling $932,000. That includes the down payment, the cars, the monthly allowances, the credit card debts, the vacations, and the club memberships. Nearly $1 million. And in return for this inclusion, I am told that I am not fit to host my own grandson's birthday party. So you are correct. I have fixed it. I have stopped the arrangement. It is over. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. They stared at the book in my hands as if it were a snake. Amanda finally broke, her face crumpling as she resorted to her final weapon, tears. "How could you be so heartless?" she sobbed. "This is about Liam. You're punishing your own grandson." "Do not bring Liam into this," I said, my voice hardening for the first time. "This is not about Liam. This is about his parents, who believe that the statement a kitchen makes is more important than the love a grandmother gives. Liam would be just as happy with a simple cake and some balloons in the backyard of this unsuitable house. The house where his mother always had a birthday party. But that isn't good enough for you, is it?" Mark finally exploded. All pretense of civility vanished, leaving only raw, ugly entitlement. "Enough!" he roared. "You're a bitter, lonely old woman, and you're trying to ruin our lives because you don't have one of your own. You live in this dusty museum, clinging to the past, and you can't stand to see us happy and successful." There it was, the truth as he saw it. It was the ugliest thing I had ever heard, and it was the most liberating. He had finally handed me the gift of his unvarnished contempt, severing the last, threadbare cord of familial obligation. I smiled, a small, sad smile. "Thank you, Mark," I said softly. "You have just confirmed that I have made the best financial decision of my life." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "The visiting hours at the dusty museum are now over. I suggest you leave." Amanda stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. She looked from my calm face to her husband's raging one, a silent choice hanging in the air. As always, she chose him. She took his arm and allowed him to pull her toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back, her face a mask of betrayal. "You will regret this, Mom," she whispered. "No, darling," I replied, my voice gentle once more. "I started regretting things 7 years ago. Today is the day I stopped." I closed the door on their shocked faces, turned the deadbolt, and leaned against the solid wood. The house was quiet again. But this time it was a righteous silence. The siege was over and the fortress had held. They had declared war and they had just lost the first major battle. But I knew them. This was far from over. Their next move would be public. They would try to weaponize shame. I walked to the phone and dialed Arthur's number again. "Arthur," I said. "Phase 2. It's time to write a new story." The days following the siege were eerily quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence that felt heavy with unspoken threats. My phone no longer buzzed with their demands, and no one hammered on my door. But I knew this was not peace. It was a regrouping. Mark and Amanda were not the type to accept defeat. They were accustomed to getting what they wanted, and when denied, their strategy was not to retreat but to escalate. They had lost the private battle, so I knew they would take the war public. I spent those days not in anxious waiting, but in quiet preparation. My conversations with Arthur were no longer about defense, but about strategy. We were building a fortress, not just of financial firewalls and legal trusts, but of narrative. "They will try to paint you as unstable, Alina," he had warned, his voice crisp over the phone. "It's the classic playbook. When you can't win on the facts, you attack the person. They will use vague language, hint at elder abuse from the other direction, or suggest you've lost your grip. We need to be ready with the one thing they can't fight, the cold, hard, documented truth." The first volley came on a Friday afternoon, exactly as Arthur had predicted. It was my cousin Carol who called, her voice a mixture of cloying sympathy and morbid curiosity. "Alina, dear, I just saw Amanda's post on Facebook. Oh, it's just heartbreaking. So brave of her to share her pain. Are you all right? She mentioned of a cruel family matter." I thanked Carol for her concern and ended the call quickly. My hands were steady as I opened my laptop and navigated to Amanda's Facebook page. And there it was, a carefully selected photo of her, Mark, and Liam, all beaming in perfectly coordinated pastel outfits, a picture of manufactured bliss. The caption beneath it was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. "With the heaviest of hearts," it began, "we've had to make the difficult decision to cancel our darling Liam's 5th birthday party. We are navigating a sudden and deeply painful family matter that has made it impossible to proceed. It is a profound sorrow to see how some family relationships can change, and how those you have always loved and supported can become controlling and cruel when you least expect it. We are choosing to protect our son from this negativity. All we have ever wanted is to build a beautiful and secure life for our family. Please keep us in your thoughts and prayers as we try to heal from this unexpected wound. The post was a work of art. It named no one, but it accused everyone. It was a dog whistle for every friend and relative who had witnessed my generosity over the years. It positioned them as the noble victims, bravely protecting their child from a toxic, controlling, and implicitly unstable matriarch. The comments section was a tidal wave of misplaced sympathy. "Oh, Amanda, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Sending love," from a country club friend. "Stay strong." "You are wonderful parents," from a neighbor. "Family can be the most difficult. Thinking of you," from one of Mark's colleagues. They had successfully framed the narrative. I was the villain, a cruel old woman withholding love and support, punishing her perfect children for unknown sins. My phone began to ring again, one well-meaning but clueless relative after another, all calling to express their concern. They were a jury that had heard only one side of the story and had already reached a verdict. I let them talk. I listened to their veiled questions and their offers to mediate. Then I hung up, took a deep breath, and sent a one-line email to Arthur. "They've made their move." His reply was instantaneous. "Phase 2 is a go. The packages are ready." The next morning, I drove to a print shop and then to the post office. I wasn't mailing one letter. I was mailing 12. Each one was a thick, professional-looking packet sent via certified mail with return receipt requested. The recipients were a carefully curated list, a cross-section of Mark and Amanda's carefully constructed world. There was one for Mark's boss, the CEO of his real estate development firm, one for the president of their country club, one for Mark's parents, who had always looked down on me as a simple bookkeeper, and one for each of the 9 people who had left the most sanctimonious comments on Amanda's post. Inside each envelope was a cover letter, printed on heavy, cream-colored stationery, the kind used for formal announcements. The letter was calm, dignified, and devastating. "Dear recipient's name," it began. "You are receiving this communication because you have recently expressed concern, either publicly or privately, regarding a painful family matter alluded to by my daughter, Amanda, and my son-in-law, Mark. As my name has been implicitly connected to this situation, and there have been suggestions of cruelty and instability on my part, I feel it is my responsibility to provide the factual context in order to set the record straight and alleviate any concerns for my well-being." The letter continued. "For the past 7 years, 84 months, I have provided my daughter and her husband with significant and consistent financial support, under the initial understanding that I was helping them get on their feet. This support has totaled, to date, approximately $932,400. This figure comprises, in part, an $80,000 gift for the down payment on their home, $420,000 in direct monthly cash transfers to a joint account, the full payment of multiple credit card accounts, which included purchases such as a $4,000 Chanel handbag and a $12,000 family vacation to Tuscany, and gifts including a $60,000 BMW for Mark's 35th birthday." I paused in the letter to let the numbers sink in, then provided the catalyst for the current pain. "The recent, painful family matter arose when I was informed that my home was dated, unsuitable, and an embarrassment, and therefore an inappropriate venue for my grandson's 5th birthday party. This judgment was delivered in the same conversation in which I was asked to provide an additional $50,000 for a cosmetic renovation of their own kitchen. My decision to decline this most recent request and to cease all future financial support has been characterized as a cruel and controlling act." The final paragraph was the kill shot. The cancellation of Liam's party was, therefore, not due to any malicious action on my part, but was a direct consequence of my daughter and son-in-law discovering that they would need to finance the event themselves. My deepest regret in this entire affair is that my grandson has been used as a pawn in his parents' public narrative of victimhood. To that end, please be assured that I have taken separate and private legal measures to establish a substantial trust for Liam's future education and well-being, ensuring he will not be affected by his parents' financial expectations. I thank you for your past concern and trust that these facts provide a clearer picture of the situation. Attached to each letter was a single, damning piece of evidence, a professionally printed, summarized balance sheet prepared by Arthur's firm, showing the major categories of my financial support with a grand total at the bottom. It was an invoice for their lifestyle. As I slid the last envelope into the mail slot, I felt no malice, only a profound sense of clarity. They had chosen the weapon, public shame. They had aimed it at me, thinking I was a soft target. They had failed to understand that shame only works when there are secrets to hide. I had just declassified every secret they had. I had turned their weapon around and aimed it not at their character, but at the one thing they held more sacred than anything else, their carefully curated image. The return receipts would start coming back in 2 days. The phone calls that followed would be of a very different nature. The story they had started was over. My story was just beginning. The first of the return receipts arrived on a Tuesday morning, a flimsy green card sitting starkly against the pile of junk mail and catalogs. The signature on it was shaky but clear. Carol Jennings, my overly concerned cousin. By the end of the day, there were 3 more. By Friday, a neat stack of 12 green cards sat on my mahogany desk, a complete set. Each one was a silent testament, a legal confirmation that my message had been delivered and received. My truth was now loose in their world, a world built on carefully curated images and unspoken financial arrangements. I had not fired a cannonball. I had planted a seed of truth. Now, all I had to do was wait for it to grow. The first phone call came not from an accuser, but from an apologist. It was Margaret, a woman from my old bridge club who was also a friend of Mark's mother and one of the most effusive commenters on Amanda's post. Her voice, usually so confident and booming, was a flustered, apologetic whisper. "Eleanor, my dear, I received your letter," she stammered. "I am calling to offer my most sincere, my most profound apologies. I had no idea, the way Amanda presented it." Well, it was deeply misleading. To think that you have been carrying that family for years, the generosity is astounding, and the way they have treated you is, well, it's simply monstrous. Please, forgive an old fool for jumping to conclusions. I listened patiently, accepting her apology with a calm grace that seemed to unnerve her even more. One by one, over the next 48 hours, the calls came in. Each was a variation on the same theme: shock, embarrassment, and a frantic attempt to distance themselves from Amanda and Mark and realign with me. The narrative had not just shifted, it had been completely annihilated and rewritten. Their public shaming had backfired with the force of a supernova. The most significant call came on Saturday. It was Patricia, Mark's mother. Her voice was strained, stripped of its usual condescending superiority. "Eleanor," she began, dispensing with any pleasantries, "we need to talk about this situation, your letter. You sent one to Robert's boss, to the president of the yacht club. Do you have any idea what you have done?" Her tone wasn't one of anger at me, but one of sheer, unadulterated panic. She was a woman watching her family's social standing evaporate in real time. "I believe I have a very clear idea of what I have done, Patricia," I replied, my voice cool and even. "I have corrected a false narrative that your son and my daughter created. I have replaced their fiction with facts." "Facts," she screeched. "You have aired our family's dirty laundry for the entire city to see. Robert is beside himself. Mark he's a wreck. You have to put a stop to this. Retract the letter. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding, a moment of stress." I almost laughed at the absurdity. She wanted me to lie to protect the reputation of the son she raised, a man who had stood in my house, and called me a bitter, lonely old woman. Let me be perfectly clear, Patricia. The only misunderstanding was my 7-year-long belief that my generosity was appreciated. Your son and my daughter built their lives on my money while treating me with contempt. When I stopped providing the funds, they tried to destroy my reputation. The consequences of those actions are theirs, and theirs alone, to manage. I will not be retracting a single word. I could hear her sharp, panicked breaths on the other end of the line. But the club. His career, they'll be ruined. The career he couldn't afford without my help. The club membership I paid the dues for, I asked softly. Perhaps this will be a valuable lesson for them in living within their own means. You should have taught it to your son years ago. Goodbye, Patricia. I hung up the phone before she could reply, cutting off the flow of her panic. The final, most devastating blow was delivered not by phone, but through Arthur. He called me on Monday afternoon, his voice grim but with an undercurrent of satisfaction. "It's done, Aliner," he said. "I just got off the phone with the general counsel for Mark's firm. His CEO, Mr. Abernathy, was the first one to receive your package. He is, to put it mildly, a man who values discretion and integrity." The fact that his rising star vice president was financing a fraudulent lifestyle on the back of his elderly mother-in-law's pension did not sit well. My hand tightened on the receiver. "What did they do?" I asked. "They were smart about it," Arthur explained. "They can't fire him for his family life, as sordid as it is, but they can reevaluate his suitability for high-level, client-facing roles. Mark has been indefinitely reassigned. They've moved him from acquisitions to a back-office role in regional zoning analysis. It's a dead-end desk job. No clients, no commissions, no path to partner. They've effectively put his career in a box and nailed the lid shut. His days of playing the big shot are over." The news settled not with a triumphant bang, but with a quiet, profound sense of equilibrium. It was poetic justice in its purest form. The career he had used as a justification for his greed, the career I had been told I was investing in, had been neutered by the revelation of the truth behind the investment. Arthur had more news. The yacht club's board had held an emergency meeting. Mark had been politely asked to resign from the regatta committee, and their application for a permanent berth, something they had been lobbying for years, was now at the bottom of a very long, very deep pile. The social pillars they had so carefully erected were crumbling to dust. They had been exposed not as the power couple they pretended to be, but as what they truly were: charlatans living a life funded by the very person they disdained. I spent the evening in my garden, weeding the rose bushes David and I had planted together. The sun was setting, the same bruised purple and defiant orange as the day I had first called Arthur. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I had not sought revenge. I had sought justice. I had not destroyed their lives. I had simply stopped paying for them, and they had collapsed under the weight of their own hollowness. As I was heading inside, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. The message contained a single word, a question that was also an accusation, a plea, and a cry of disbelief. "Why?" I looked at the word on the small, bright screen. Why had I done it? Why had I refused to continue to be their silent, smiling bank? Why had I chosen my dignity over their desires? I thought about my beautiful, lived-in, unsuitable home. I thought about my husband's memory. I thought about the grandson who was being taught that a kitchen's statement was more important than a grandmother's love. I typed my reply, just as brief, just as final. "Because you forgot to say thank you." I sent the message and blocked the number. The battle was over. The truth had won. But as I turned off the lights in my quiet, peaceful house, a new thought surfaced. What happens to people like Mark and Amanda when they have lost everything they value? When the money is gone, the career is dead, and the social standing is ashes. What does a cornered animal do when it has nothing left to lose? A month passed. The world, which had tilted so violently on its axis, slowly began to right itself. The phone calls stopped. The torrent of drama subsided into a still, quiet pool of peace. I began to rediscover the simple rhythms of a life lived for oneself. I rejoined my bridge club, where Margaret greeted me with a warm, respectful hug. I spent long afternoons in my garden, my hands in the soil, coaxing life from the earth. I took a weekend trip to the coast, something I hadn't been able to afford in years, and walked along the beach, letting the salty wind whip the last vestiges of their drama from my hair. I was not just surviving, I was thriving. The quiet in my home was no longer a symbol of absence, but one of sovereignty. I had reclaimed my life, my finances, and my dignity. I thought foolishly that the story was over. The letter that arrived was not in a cheap, personal envelope, but a crisp, legal one bearing the letterhead of a law firm I had never heard of. It was not a high-end firm like Arthur S. It was the kind of low-rent practice that advertises on bus benches. My hands were steady as I opened it. The words inside were both shocking and utterly predictable. It was a formal notice of intent. Mark and Amanda were petitioning the court to have me declared mentally incompetent, seeking to establish a conservatorship over my person and my estate. Their argument was a twisted tapestry of lies, citing my sudden and erratic behavior, my financial recklessness, referring to my decision to stop giving them money, and my paranoid and hostile actions, referring to the letters I had sent as proof of my deteriorating mental state. It was their final, desperate gambit. If they could not have my money willingly, they would try to take it by force, by stripping me of my autonomy and my rights under the guise of concern. They wanted to make me a prisoner in my own life. I immediately called Arthur. He was silent for a moment after I read the letter to him, and I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. "This is the last gasp of a desperate animal, Eleanor," he said, his voice a low growl. "It's a garbage motion. They have no evidence, and your well-documented strategic actions will make them look like fools in court. But we have to respond. I'll draft the legal reply, but I think it's time for one final meeting, on our terms, in my office. I want to see the looks on their faces when they realize who they're truly dealing with." I agreed. It was time to end this, not in a courtroom, but face to face. It was time for them to see that the woman they thought was a weak-minded relic was the one holding all the cards. They arrived at Arthur's office looking like ghosts of their former selves. Their expensive clothes hung on them, ill-fitting now that the confidence that had once filled them out was gone. Mark's face was sallow and thin, his eyes darting around the intimidating boardroom as if looking for an escape route. Amanda looked older, worn down, the youthful glow she had guarded so fiercely completely extinguished. They sat opposite me at the vast, polished table, Arthur at my side, a silent, formidable presence. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice calm and clear in the quiet room. "I received the letter from your legal counsel, a petition for conservatorship, a bold move." "Mom, we're just worried about you," Amanda said, her voice thin and reedy. It was a pathetic attempt to stick to their script. "Your actions, they haven't been normal. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I asked, allowing a hint of incredulous amusement into my tone. "Or protect your access to my assets? Let's not pretend this is about anything other than my refusal to continue funding your lifestyle. You believe I am mentally incompetent because I have finally decided to act in my own best interest." Arthur slid a document across the table. "This is a full psychiatric evaluation of Mrs. Ross, conducted last week by Dr. Julian Ames, the head of geriatric psychology at University Hospital," he said flatly. "His conclusion is that your mother is not only sound of mind, but possesses a business and strategic acumen in the top percentile for her age group. Your petition, should you be foolish enough to file it, will be laughed out of court, and you may find yourselves facing a countersuit for malicious prosecution." Mark paled, his eyes fixated on the report. He knew they were beaten. This was checkmate, but I had one final move to make. "However," I said, drawing their attention back to me, "I am prepared to offer you a settlement." I slid a second document across the table. It was a quitclaim deed. Their eyes widened as they read the title. "You want the house, don't you?" I said softly. "The dusty museum. The home you found so embarrassing. It's the last major asset you think you can get your hands on. So here is my offer. I will sign this house over to you, free and clear. It will be yours today." They stared at me, stunned into absolute silence. It was the one thing they had never expected. I leaned forward. "But when I say the house is yours, I mean all of it. The property taxes, which are $15,000 a year, the homeowner's insurance, the cost of heating a 4-bedroom home, the constant, expensive upkeep. The dated wallpaper and the shag carpet will be your problem to solve with your money. The leaking faucet in the upstairs bathroom will be your plumber to call. The roof that will need replacing in 5 years will be your 5-figure bill to pay." I sat back, letting the reality of my offer sink in. I, in turn, will move into a lovely condominium downtown. I will take my portfolio of stocks and bonds, my pension, my cash savings, the $932,000 you already burned through, and the considerable amount you haven't yet touched. I will take my photographs, my mother's pearls, and my husband's memory, and I will be free of you. You will have the house. That is the deal. You get the albatross you so despised, and I get my life. The silence stretched. I watched the dawning horror in Amanda's eyes as she finally understood. They never wanted the house. They wanted its value. They wanted me to sell it and give them the money. They wanted the symbol of family stability, but none of the responsibility. Faced with the actual burden of owning their prize, they were paralyzed. It was a prison of their own making. We can't," Amanda whispered, her voice cracking. It was the first honest thing she had said in years. "We can't afford it." "No," I said gently. "You can't. And in that moment, she began to weep. Not the performative, manipulative tears of before, but the silent, wrenching sobs of true and total loss. She wasn't crying for the money. She was crying for the mother she had discarded, for the home she had scorned, for the life of love and support she had traded away for a hollow image. She had finally hit the bottom, and she had discovered it was a long, long way down. Mark just sat there, a hollowed-out man, his last scheme turned to ash in his hands. They did not sign the deed. They stood up, defeated, and walked out of the office, out of the building, and out of my life. I did sell the house. 3 months later, on my own terms, to a young family with bright-eyed children who fell in love with the backyard. I took the things that mattered, the photos, the quilts, David's favorite armchair, and moved into a beautiful condominium with a view of the entire city. My new life is full. It is full of friends, of travel, of quiet evenings reading, of the freedom to be myself. Sometimes I look out at the sparkling city lights and think of them. I do not feel anger or even pity. I feel nothing at all. They are just a story of a bad investment I finally wrote off. My ledger is balanced. My accounts are closed, and my future is entirely my own. If you liked this story, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content just like this. We love hearing from you, so please share your thoughts on Alina's final decision in the comments section below. What would you have done in her situation? Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.